Hello, reporter room investigators. Come on in, come on in. It's so great to have the opportunity to be with you today. We're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger case. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 packages ready to go for you guys. We have a huge show with lots of information. So come on in and tell me where you are from. Today, we're going to be talking about the surveillance camera video that investigators are using to prove that Bryan Kohberger acted alone. We're going to talk about the prosecution and the fact that they're demanding to conduct their own psychological testing on Bryan Kohberger. Is this what the secret May 5th hearing is in relation to, or is there something else going on? The judge rejects another motion from the defense. Will this hurt Bryan Kohberger's case, or will it not matter too much? And then we're going to talk about the roommates, Dylan and Bethany, with new timeline information on them. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's connections to the victims. Yes, he does have connections. New information from Steve Gonzalez that we didn't go through on our last live stream. And then Bryan Kohberger searched the crime before the 911 call was made at noon when Ethan's friends came over, Emma and Hunter. So is this the real reason why he returned to the 1122 King Road home, or was it because he forgot his knife sheath? Bryan Kohberger's suspicious sister, is she cooperating with the prosecution? And is she planning to testify against Bryan Kohberger? And Bryan Kohberger's history of behavior problems. Lots of stuff to get into. Let's get started. My name is Jessica Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you have not subscribed to Reporter Room, oh my gosh, it's free. Please do. It's free and it helps me out a lot. Like, share, leave a comment, and know that I am sharing my opinion. I want to welcome our subscribers, our mods, and our channel members. Our mods are the ones with the wrenches, and our channel members are the ones with the blue, green, and red verified check marks. And also want to state at the beginning that Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. But with that being said, I do have to talk about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger because it's his defense team that's filing motions. It's the prosecution. He's the only one who's been indicted, who's been charged, indicted by a grand jury, and standing trial. And moreover, this is not a courtroom. I'm not a judge. You're not a judge. We're not the jury. So we're going to be talking about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger. So we have a lot to get into. Come on in. Tell me where you're from, because we're going to talk about the surveillance camera video that investigators are using. Are they going to be able to prove that Bryan Kohberger acted alone? The prosecution demanding to conduct their own psychological tests on Bryan Kohberger. It doesn't sound like they are 100% convinced that he is autistic. The judge rejecting another motion. Will this help or hurt Bryan Kohberger? Dylan and Bethany, new information on the roommates and their timeline. Bryan's connections to the victims, new information from Steve Gonzalez, and the fact that he searched the crime before the 911 call was made. Is this why he was parked outside the house at 9 a.m. that morning on August the 13th? And Bryan Kohberger's suspicious sister, did she report him into law enforcement, and is she cooperating with the prosecution? And we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's history and pattern of behavior problems. Let's start with the surveillance camera video. Let me pull this up.
Of the cell phone. What people have to understand is the cell phone is not like GPS.
That the scientist and the science behind this, when they do match his DNA with the DNA that was found at the crime scene, I think that will be an extremely important step. 51%.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Davies.
Hello. Okay, so welcome to Reporter Room. I'm glad you're here with me today. Let me go ahead and grab the first package. as we have so much to go. We're going to just jump right in. So we're going to start off with my first source is going to be the Idaho Statesman. And we're going to start with this one. Let me grab it. It's not giving me a share button, so let me go in this way. Okay. All right. So you can see here we've got Bill Thompson, who is the prosecutor, together with Ashleigh Jennings, who is the other prosecutor in this case. Let me move myself over here, make sure I'm not in the way. All right, come on in, tell me where you're from, and let's go ahead and dive into this. So, the cameras traced Bryan Kohberger's victims' alleged route before the victims were done away with. Now, surveillance camera videos that investigators used to build their case in the University of Idaho student crimes, I'm watching my words here, is expected to be played at BK's upcoming trial, with prosecutors planning to show the juror how footage and the resulting timeline point to Bryan Kohberger as the lone suspect in this crime. So they are going to prove that he did not have an accomplice, that he was able to accomplish this on his own. So it sounds like they did good old-fashioned detective work, because the police canvassed the Moscow neighborhood near the off-campus home, the 1122 King Road house, where Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana were all sleeping on November 13th of 2022. And they obtained the video from the homes and area businesses to help narrow down the timeline of the crimes. Now, BK has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree M and also breaking and entering. And we know this is a capital punishment case if the jury does find him guilty. So the prosecution believes that the stabby were initially thought to have happened in a 25-minute window between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. That's what the probable cause affidavit told us. But law enforcement's been able to tighten up that timeline by reviewing surveillance cameras from more than 20 locations, and they are alleging that the 4 victims were done away with in a 13-minute time span between 4:07 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., according to recent court filings. Now, Ann Taylor, who is Bryan Kohberger's public defense attorney, has maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings since he was arrested on December 30th of 2022. Now, that police canvass for video footage to help the investigation, including local businesses in downtown Moscow, where Kaylee and Maddie and Dylan and Bethany and also Ethan and Xana were all out. So they got video surveillance footage to show who was where and around what time. They have 14 cameras from the local bar showing that Kaylee and Maddie left the Corner Club bar at 1:37 a.m. and they arrived at 1:43 at the Grub Truck. They were being escorted by John Jack Showalter near Friendship Square. And then about 10 minutes after that, they headed home in an Uber-like vehicle to the 1122 King Road house. So we've got the map of the timeline up right here. Now, the video retrieved from the Main Street businesses, which is Cafe Arista, the Moscow Bagel and Deli, helped law enforcement fill in that gap. This is according to the prosecution. Now, other security footage that was leaked in December of 2022, about 2 weeks before Bryan Kohberger was arrested, appeared to show Kaylee and Maddie walking with John Jack Showalter. They're saying it's a male companion, but we know it's John Jack Showalter, from the local Corner Club to the Grub Truck video. And you can see the 3 of them walking here. There's Kaylee, there's Maddie, and there's John Jack Showalter. He's also known as Hoodie Guy. So he was escorting the girls down for their safety. It was late at night. Now, these young people were done away with, and they were doing everything right. They were out in pairs. They were being walked, when the women were out alone, they were being walked by, another male to help them get safely to and fro. So it's really, really sad that this crime occurred. So more surveillance video from the Farmers Insurance Branch assisted police in understanding that Kaylee and Maddie's movements before they received the ride home from a private party, that's the Uber-like vehicle, at 1:56 a.m. Now, Matt Manderville, who operates one of the two farmers insurance offices in Moscow, told the Idaho Statesman, which is my source on this, that police called him in the weeks after the students were done away with, wanting to know, did he have any security footage from his building? So his building sits right at the main road that connects Moscow with Pullman, and he didn't. Kelly Kimberline Gilder, the city's other farmer's agent, whose office is at Main Street, where Kaylee and Maddie were walking on November 13th, refused to answer. Remember, there's a gag order in place. Questions directed the Idaho Statesman to reach out to Moscow police for further information. Prosecutors said they no longer plan to rely on the farmer's insurance surveillance video during the trial, so it sounds like they got something even better. Meanwhile, so they are proving where everybody was and at what time. This is what the prosecution's working on. And they're also going to show that Bryan Kohberger acted alone. Meanwhile, we know that Xana and Ethan, who were dating, were at his fraternity Sigma Chi from about 9 p.m. until 1:45 a.m. on November 13th. Now, we don't know the exact time that they arrived back at the King Road property yet, but we're probably going to find out more from the prosecution once they get more video footage in front of the jury. But we do know that the Sigma Chi is only 400 feet from the 1122 King Road home. So they didn't have that far to wait. We do know that they returned after 2 a.m. And this is according to recent court filings. Now, suspect vehicle 1 circled King Road area, not the house, but the area, at least 5 times that night. And law enforcement obtained video footage of at least 5 cameras around Pullman, including the WSU campus, to track a white Hyundai Elantra, a white sedan believed to be the same vehicle recorded near the 1122 King Road home, which on August 13th. The affidavit said the FBI vehicle expert determined that the car was a white Hyundai Elantra between 2011 to 2016. And the police said they labeled it suspect vehicle 1. Ann Taylor did not want it to be called this, but the judge overruled her. Now, Bryan Kohberger did own a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, and the FBI expert initially believed that the vehicle was a 2011 to 2013, but later revised it to extend to 2016. So there were 2 announcements that went out, and this has caused some confusion of people saying, well, they didn't even have the right vehicle. Well, they look very similar. If you look at a 2013 and a 2016, they look almost the same, but they had updated it prior to arresting Bryan Kohberger. Now, BK's defense pushed to stop. They did not want the FBI expert to use the term suspect vehicle 1 about a car seen in several surveillance videos while testifying at the trial. They argued that it would be unfairly prejudicial to their client because labeling the car from various bits of footage as the same vehicle is, they just described it as speculative, which in my opinion, I didn't think the judge was going to go for this, because the only way you would have continuous footage of that car is if you had a drone following it or law enforcement following it. And there would be no way they would know in advance that he was going to commit a crime like this. So the judge did deny the defense's motion and ruled that there was absolutely no legal basis to exclude this word suspect vehicle 1. Now, the white sedan was first recorded in Pullman at 2:44 a.m. on November 13th as it headed east on State Road 270 in the direction of Moscow. It was recorded again at 3:02 by a surveillance camera at Floyd's cannabis company located on State Road 270, according to the prosecution. Now, itchy nose. At 3:26 a.m., the cameras at 3 residences at the 700 block, so not 1 but 2, not 3 but 3 residences of the Indian Hills Drive, the Moscow, picked up the same vehicles, this is according to the prosecution. And then 2 minutes later, At 3:28, there's another surveillance footage from the Sunset Mart gas station in Moscow, recording the Hyundai Elantra turning west about a half mile and headed in the direction of the 1122 King Road home. And then we have, and Ann Taylor filed motions trying to keep all of this footage out, and her reasoning was she just didn't have time to go through it. And I didn't think that dog was going to hunt, because you could imagine the precedent that that would set. So they have also security footage from the 1112 King Road vehicle. So they have a total of over 12 hours of raw video footage. And over the next 34 minutes, this Hyundai Elantra circled the neighborhood at least 5 times before it appeared to park at 4:07 a.m. So, and then there's no subsequent vehicle activity captured for 13 minutes after the headlights are seen. At 4:20, they have the white sedan leaving King Road at a quote high rate of speed and appearing to turn west on Taylor Avenue to exit the area. Now, we know he took a meandering drive back to Pullman, Washington, and this would have been in part to avoid security cameras, but it also could have been to get rid of some of the things that he would have had in his kit. At 5:26, a vehicle matching the same description is recorded at the ENS services at 1300 Johnson Road in Pullman, the prosecutor said, and footage from the security camera at Sunset Mart gas station in Pullman showed the car heading north on State Road 270. Cameras at the WSU campus recorded the vehicle making its way north near Beasley Coliseum, which is also about a mile from BK's Pullman apartment. So what I think is they're going to be able to show that he was in the car driving by himself. So that, because they are saying that they can prove that he acted alone. So I think this is really interesting, you guys. All right. So let's review the went through the surveillance cameras, and we're going to talk about the prosecution demanding to conduct their own psychological testing on Bryan Kohberger. It sounds like they're maybe not buying that he is autistic. The judge rejects another motion. Will this help Bryan Kohberger? Will this hurt Bryan Kohberger? We're going to talk about Dylan and Bethany, some new information regarding what they were doing, and BK's searching the crime scene before the 911, before the emergency line was ever contacted. Why was he at the house at 9 a.m.? And why was he looking up a crime that hadn't been reported to the police? And then we have Bryan Kohberger's sister, his suspicious sister. Did she turn him in, and is she planning to testify for the prosecution? And we have BK's history of behavior problems in just a moment. So please stay with me. So let's talk about the prosecutors in the case against BK have asked the court for permission to conduct their own psychological testing. And I'm wondering if this is what this hearing is about, you guys. Let me see if I can grab this. I just want to pull up something so I have, if somebody comes by, they know what in the heck I'm talking about. Let's see if I have, there we go. We'll put them on, we'll put the victims on the screen. Okay, so let's dig into this. Okay, so it doesn't sound like the prosecution is buying the autistic. And from what we've been able to learn so far, we have learned that this diagnosis came while he was in jail. It came when he was sitting in jail. So this was not something that was diagnosed while he was in childhood. So this, and his mother reportedly dug through old records in an effort to help Dr. Orr arrive at her conclusions. Now, this doesn't mean that he is not autistic. It doesn't mean he is autistic, but it sounds like the prosecution wants proof. And I don't know. I'm thinking that we have a secret hearing, one that's closed to the public, May 5th. And then on May 15th, we have a hearing that's open to all of us. But I'm wondering if this is the reason for this secret hearing, if they're going to be talking about mental health issues, which might be a HIPAA violation to talk about in front of all of us. Let me know if you think it's for a different reason and what reason you think it is. So we know also that the judge, let's dig into this. Okay, so this is really interesting. The judge, sounds like he was not having it. Okay, so he slammed, like big time slammed, um, Ann Taylor and the defense team. So let's talk about that. Okay, so in let me grab this. Okay. I have like way too much open. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So he is called it a hollow attempt to dodge capital punishment. Woo! This judge is, I mean, Ann Taylor did get another bite at the apple. She may get a more liberal jury, but I don't think, I think the judge, and let me know if you have a different feeling on it. I think the Latah County judge, Judge John Judge, was a lot uh, more easygoing. I just think this judge is following the letter of the law. He's keeping things on track. He's organized. He expects the prosecution and defense to be organized. And if somebody comes up and tries to snow him, he, slams them, right? He bought, not literally, but he's not having it. So get this. He denied Bryan Kohberger's motion to remove capital punishment as a potential punishment, despite the defense team's claim of a disorganized evidence discovery. So they were saying, well, we have the discovery, because remember, for a long time, they kept claiming they didn't have it. So they're not claiming that anymore. But now they're saying that, oh, but we got it, but it's just but it's disorganized. It's not organized enough for us. And this is what the judge said. He clapped back on this, and he wrote in an order on Tuesday. And let me just tell you what Ann Taylor said, because I want to make sure I have both sides. So during the hearing, we heard Ann Taylor presented the motion to strike the capital punishment, arguing that the discovery produced by the prosecutor was both voluminous, so a lot, and unorganized. And BK's defense attorney, Ann Taylor, argued that this meant that she was not able to meaningfully review and investigate the evidence in preparation for a trial, which is currently scheduled to begin in August, with jury selection beginning July 30th. Now, the judge just was not having it. He characterized this as ring hollow, were the words that he used. And he said that the defense had been receiving discovery in the same manner for over 2 years, he wrote. He said the defense has not sought additional resources to hire additional staff to discover or obtain litigation document control software to help organize and sort the evidence. His lead counsel insisted that this is Ann Taylor, be allowed to take on a second high-profile capital case despite the voluminous discovery, he's using her words, in this case. So he just kind of throws it back at her. And, and it basically said, if it's really, because I don't think he believes that she has too much to go through. I think he feels like she's trying to delay. It's a stalling tactic. That's what I think. This is my opinion. Let me know if you think that that the judge believes that Ann Taylor was trying to stall the trial by saying she had too much to go through. Put a 1 in the chat. If you think that Ann Taylor was not trying to stall the trial, but had some other motivation when she claimed that there was too much discovery for her to go through, she had too much to do, put a 2 in the chat. I want to see where we're at on this. So the judge also wrote that Ann Taylor indicated that her practice is to personally review all the discovery herself, rather than rely on associates and staff to review materials to cut the relevant information and point what materials need to review by lead counsel. And he said these actions are not indicative of an overburdened defense team. Addressing one of the arguments from BK's defense team that the prosecutors larded its production with entirely irrelevant documents, the judge said there's no proof of that occurring. So he was just not having it. And he had a little more to say too. Let me see, grab this. Okay, so basically he felt like this was a bad faith move on Ann Taylor's part. And so he wrote he was denying Ann Taylor's motion to remove the capital punishment. And he said, quote, because the defendant has failed to show a discovery violation or due process violation by the state, sanctions are not warranted. And he said the defendant has not shown, so the defendant, that's Bryan Kohberger and the defense team, have not proven any bad faith by the state with regard to discovery production. While discovery is indeed voluminous, that's just a fancy way of saying a lot, the court does not find that the manner in which the state produced it violates legal precedent or otherwise constitutes misconduct. So basically, the judge said that Ann Taylor and the defense team did not prove that the prosecution, aka the state, was turning over evidence in bad faith. He said the defense did not prove this. He went on to say that he did not find the manner in which the state produced the discovery to violate any legal precedent or in otherwise constitute misconduct. And he also pointed out that Ann Taylor took on another capital punishment case, even though she already had an obligation to Bryan Kohberger. So we're going to talk about the judges. We're going to talk about Dylan and Bethany, Bryan Kohberger's connections to victims, new information from Steve Gonzalez. The Bryan Kohberger searched the crime scene before the 911 call was placed. BK's suspicious sister, is she going to testify against him? Did she turn him in? And Bryan Kohberger's history of behavior problems in just a moment. So please stay with me. So the other thing, besides telling Ann Taylor that, there was absolutely no proof, he also said, kind of clapped back at her for demanding to have everything, saying that she wanted everything, and then complaining about getting everything and saying that it was too much. So anyway, he just wasn't having it. So let's talk about Dylan and Bethany, and then we're going to talk about new information from Steve Gonzalez and the 911 call. Why did Bryan Kohberger search this crime scene, this crime, before the 911 call, and his sister in just a second. So please stay with me. But let's talk about the story of Dylan and Bethany. And I do want to check in and see where you guys are at. I want to put the victims up today. Let me see where you guys are at with the poll that we're doing. So come on in, tell me where you're from, and let's see where we have I'm looking for 1s and 2s. I see them now. Okay, got them. First of all, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you so much if you're modding today. I want to thank our head mod brother Mike and Njaz for both being here. There's Mike. Thank you so much for modding today, brother Mike, and thank you so much, Njaz, for modding today. These are our two head mods, along with Six Sensibility, who I haven't seen in the chat yet, but that doesn't mean she's not here. Okay, so come on in, tell me where you're from, and give this a thumbs up, but let's go through this poll. I'm just scrolling back down. Yeah, the judge was mad. He was mad. He was just, I mean, man, you don't want to, this is like not a judge you want to play with. He's just not going to have it. Hey, Kate. Okay, let's see where we are on the poll. I'm looking for 1s and 2s. I scrolled on by. Just scrolling down. I know I'm behind on chat. There it is. Okay, so 1 from Lainey, 1 from PJ's, 1 from Brenda, 1 from Betsy. If you're just joining me, come on in and come on up and talk to me in the top chat, you guys. Brother Mike put a 1. Brenda Lee says a 1. Malibu thinks stalling. Okay. You're putting a 1 if you think that Ann Taylor was stalling, and you're putting a 2 if you think she was not stalling. Wicked says that Ann is the student and loose of the teacher. Lori put a 1. Per Anderson put a 1. Linda put a 1. True Crime Snippy put a 1. Tony said Kohberger wasn't jealous of average-looking, hard-drinking, immature college girls and frat chads. Okay. Mike said, yeah, she wants to do anything she can to delay. Veronica thinks it's a 1. Marco says life is not difficult and painful enough without having situations like this to justify. Yeah, exactly. Brother Mike said, I think she knows it doesn't get any better for BK. Wicked put in a 1. Thanks for modding today, you guys. Thanks for modding, Wicked. Vicky says, I just really respect your opinion. Thank you so much. I respect yours as well. Let's see. All right. So I see a lot of ones. I'm like looking for ones right now. Ones. Yeah, please hit the thumbs up button. Let YouTube know we're doing a G-rated show. I try to watch my words because I don't know if you have little ones in the room or not. Marco says that she just thinks she's smarter than the average cub. Malibu says denied. Brenda says, I think she's a control freak who won't give anyone on her team the respect to trust them to review evidence. Oh, wow. That's an interesting take on it. What is a package? It means it can mean anything from news articles to videos. It means information. Okay, so it looks like I got a lot of ones. I don't see a lot of 2s. I'm trying to see if we have any 2s. So everybody does. It seems like we have a consensus that everybody does think that Ann Taylor was actively trying to delay the chat. Welcome from Minneapolis. It's so great you guys are here today. Thank you for joining me. All right, so let me just say thank you so much to Brother Mike for the $1.99 super sticker. That is really, really nice of you. I ordered the computer. Mike, I took your advice. I listened to you. I got the computer. It's not here yet, but I ordered it. Njaz, thank you for gifting the channel membership. Wow, that is so nice. If you got a channel membership from Njaz, please let her, please say thank you. And thank you so much, Njaz. That is really, really nice of you. We're going to have a members only live stream after the Chris Watts live stream today. And welcome Lori Dart Designs for becoming a Reporter Room channel member. Thank you so much. All right, so let's continue on because we have a lot to get through and I want to get through everything. So let's talk about the roommates. This is, and then we're going to talk about the 911 call. Why was Bryan Kohberger looking up the crimes before it was reported to law enforcement? Bryan Kohberger's suspicious sister, will she testify against him? And Bryan Kohberger's history of behavior problems. So let's talk about the roommates finally making sense. So let me grab that. All right. Make sure I'm not in the way. And I kind of am. Let me move myself over. That's better. Okay, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can read it along with me and make sure I'm not blocking your view. That looks good. Okay, so we finally have a better idea of what's going on with the roommate. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. But this was signed by the deputy clerk in the case. And this is a motion from the plaintiff versus regarding the plaintiff from Bruce. So, and the judge actually stood up for Dylan and Bethany, and we're going to talk about that next. So please stay with me. Let me grab this. Okay. So Dylan and Bethany, we know they're the 2 surviving roommates at the time, and we're starting to get a better idea of what was going on. We know Dylan saw the masked intruder. But we also, we've all heard the 911 call. If you haven't, I have it on my playlist on this channel. So we know that the judge is going to allow the excited utterances of the 911 call. And basically what the judge is going to be redacting from the 911 call are really only the statements that were made by Emily, who was one of Ethan's friends that showed up with one of Ethan's good friends, Hunter, that day looking for Ethan. But we've also heard that Bethany may have called and asked them to come over. So let's talk about some of this new information. And I think it's really important that we keep our minds open for new information. So we know that between 5 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., I'm not going over some of the other stuff because we already went through that on another live stream, but we know that Dylan engaged in activity on her phone, primarily creating, editing, and deleting images and video. Her phone activity then stopped at 8:05, and Dylan accessed Instagram for a few minutes. At 10, Dylan accessed Instagram again and communicated over Snapchat. At 10:32, she texted Maddie, "You up?" She didn't receive a response, and she continued to access Instagram and Snapchat until 11:29 when she texted Kaylee, "Are you up?" Again, there was no response, which Dylan thought was strange because Kaylee and Maddie are usually early wakers. They wake up early. So Dylan continued to access various social media sites, including checking Ethan and Xana's Snap Map. Remember, I told you that Snap Map can show you where people are? When we talked about why I thought law enforcement got the warrant for that. So she was accessing Snap Map to see where Ethan and Xana were, to see if they had gone out. At approximately 11:40, she texted her dad about scheduling a time for her father texted her about scheduling a time for a chat, and Dylan responded to her dad. She then received 2 texts from a person named Jenna stating, "Bro, and do you guys need me to come get you?" At approximately 11:50, Dylan calls her friend EA and asked her to come over and check the house because she was scared. EA and her boyfriend Hunter Johnson. So I originally thought that Hunter came over, that they were looking for Ethan because Hunter is Ethan's friend. But we're finding out that it actually was Dylan that invited them to come over. She wanted them to check the house. She was too scared to do it. So they met Dylan and Bethany at the bottom of the stairs, and they walked up the stairs to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Hunter went to grab a knife. He grabbed a kitchen knife. So it sounds like he was kind of scared too. And when they reached the second floor, that's when he grabbed the kitchen knife. And when he came back out, Dylan saw Xana for a split second. And I just started bawling because I thought I don't even know. I thought she was still drunk and asleep on the floor. So Dylan when she was running down to Bethany's room the night before, she caught a glimpse of Xana and just saw her lying on the floor and just thought she was, on the floor, that she, had been drinking. They'd all been out drinking. And remember, Dylan and Bethany were both impaired. And Dylan was only 19 years old. She had had over 10 drinks the night before. So they were not thinking clearly. Bethany also saw Xana lying on the floor. So Hunter told Dylan and Bethany to get out. And Emily, who had started up the stairs, also turned after Hunter instructed her not to come any further. So Hunter, I think he, got probably the biggest look at what was really going on. And shortly afterwards, Hunter exited the house and told them to call 911. He was reportedly pale white and mentioned about someone being unconscious. And remember, Steve Gonzalez told us that the victims had been done away with, and that they had that their blood had gone into their lungs, and they had literally drowned. So this didn't sound like what we would have thought it would have sounded like, especially if the perpetrator started here. And the reason we know that is that Ethan and Xana didn't call 911 either. So it didn't sound like what we thought it sounded like. And we were finding out that no matter what time 911 was called, according to Steve Gonzalez, that he does not believe the victims would have been saved. Now, at 11:56, this is when Bethany called 911 from her cell phone and spoke to the 911 operator, Carolina Calvin. And this call lasted for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I've already played it on the channel. I'm not going to play it today. And that we know the phone got passed around all over the place. And I'm not going to go through it, but I just wanted to show you guys the receipts on that. And then the court found that DM and so Dylan and Bethany's acts of making phone calls, sending or receiving text messages, and other phone activities, such as accessing social media, are not hearsay. Because Ann Taylor the defense team did not want the 911 call to come in at all. She said it was all hearsay. And the judge said, no, it's not all hearsay, but he is redacting for the jury Emily's words. He said, hearsay only captures oral assertion and written assertion or nonverbal conduct intended as an insertion. Thus, this order will focus on the content of those calls and texts to the extent available. As to the content of Dylan and Bethany's text messages about what Dylan saw, the court finds, so this is the judge's order, that they are either not hearsay because they were not offered for truth of the matter asserted, or not assertions, or if hearsay, they're likely qualify as present tense impressions or excited utterance, as set forth in Exhibit A hereto. Their verbal discussions are potentially admissible for the same reasons. The state must establish foundational requirements for such proffered statements at the time of the trial. So we found out that Dylan did text the Uber driver at 2:10 a.m. to inquire if he was driving, and we found out why. And we talked about this during our last live stream. Dylan texted the Uber driver because Dylan and Kaylee and Maddie and Xana were upstairs in either Kaylee or Maddie's room, and they were talking about going back out at around 2:10 a.m. for food. Ultimately, they decided to stay in. And I don't know if this would have stopped the perpetrator from doing the crimes that night or not, because even if they had gone out for gotten something to eat and brought it back to the house, I still think they would have been back by 4 a.m. The text messages between 4:22 and 4:26 a.m. The state argued that the 4-minute series of text messages between Dylan and Bethany, with one from Dylan to Kaylee, are admissible as either present tense impressions or excited utterance. The defendant suggests, so this is the defense team, that neither exception applies because there's no evidence, this is according to the defense, that they were sufficiently startled by the events. He points out that this is the defendant. This is Bryan Kohberger. Really, it's Ann Taylor. But he points out that Dylan claimed to only be confused. And despite stating she was scared, she ran to Bethany Funk's room instead of leaving the house or otherwise calling friends or family for help. So the court agreed with the state for that those texts qualify as assertions. So the text messages come in. Judge said, first, the present tense impression exception does not require a startling event. It simply requires that the speaker describe or explain a condition while personally perceiving it or immediately thereafter. The judge went on to say most of Dylan's texts to Bethany satisfied this exemption. She first texts that no one is answering, which describes the results of her calls to her other roommates just moments before. She also states that she is feeling confused, freaked out, and scared over what she just saw and heard, and the fact that none of her roommates are answering. She further describes the intruder. This is probably why Ann Taylor wanted to keep the text messages out, wearing a ski mask or something over his forehead and mouth. So she is saying this in a text message prior to talking to law enforcement. So people who want to say that she didn't mention the balaclava mask until after the first law enforcement interview, this may or may not be true. We'll have to hear from Dylan, but we know she said it in text messages to Bethany, which is why Ann Taylor did not want the jury to see this, in my opinion. Let me know if you have a different take on it. She also relays that her phone is going to die. Thus, the statements are likely admissible as present tense impressions. In addition, the events are significantly startling to both, this is the judge saying this, Dylan and Bethany for the purposes of excited utterance exception. Dylan and Bethany are young female college students, and the self-described scaredy cats of the house. This is how the judge describes them. I guess they describe themselves this way. They were awoken from sleep after a night of drinking. This is the judge writing this, with Dylan reporting she had heard noises and a masked intruder in their home. None of the roommates were responding to their calls and texts, further indicating something was amiss. So it sounds like the judge is, following the letter of the law here. And he's, I can see why Ann Taylor didn't want these text messages to come in, just like she didn't want the words bushy eyebrows to come in. Those are coming in also. And that's, in my opinion, because Dylan's already talking about this mask, the ski mask. So Ann Taylor can try to say, well, the law enforcement suggested it, but that makes it really hard for Ann Taylor to claim that the law enforcement suggested this balaclava ski mask when it's in the text messages between Dylan and Bethany that occurred while this is all happening. So before 911 was ever called. So the judge continues. He said he's talking about Dylan and Bethany here, were awoken from a sleep after a night of drinking, with Dylan reporting that she heard noises and saw a masked intruder in their home. None of the roommates were responding to their calls and texts, further indicating something was amiss. It would be potentially terrifying for anyone, including these young women, to argue that they would have run out of the house or called someone else for help had they been really startled, unempathetically. So he's characterizing Ann Taylor's motion that they should have run out of the house or called for help, that it's not empathetic, that unempathetically ignores these circumstances and the trauma and confusion they were evidently experiencing, which is likely offset logical thought. Indeed, the girls' confusion and fear, the fear and confusion is evident in their words, with both questioning what's going on, DM stating that's Dylan, she's freaked out, scared, and confused, and Bethany attempting to get them together quickly for safety. They were clearly under stress and attempting to make sense of a frightening situation. Additionally, the time period that elapsed between what Dylan saw and her communications with Bethany was a matter of minutes. The text exchange lasts approximately 4 minutes, with messages occurring in rapid succession, so one after another. This timeline left no room for reflection or fabrication, which is ultimately what the IRE 8031 and IRE 8032 seek to protect against. Consequently, the court concludes that the assertive text messages within this 4-minute period are likely admissible as present tense impressions and or excited utterances, assuming the requisite foundation is provided at the time of trial. So he's letting the prosecution know, hey, you guys want these in, they are coming in, but you have to lay a foundation for this. 3, DM's text to the victims. Let me grab a sip of water. Sorry, I'm just getting over a sore throat. DM text to the victims at 4:32. DM texted Kaylee, please answer. The state argues that this text is admissible as present tense impression and excited utterance. The defendant does not directly address the text. However, the court finds it more of a command or request than an assertion of fact. It is not a fact capable of being proved true or false, thus is not barred under IRE 801. At 10:23, DM texted Madison, that's Maddie, asking, are you up? Approximately an hour later, Dylan texted Kaylee, are you up? The state argues the foregoing texts are not hearsay because they will not be introduced for the truth of the matter asserted. Alternatively, the state contends that they are present tense impressions because they represent a consistency and continuation of Dylan's text from the prior night. The defendant disputes the exception applies, pointing out that Dylan had been awake and assessing social media before she sent the text messages. Again, the court does not find, so this is the judge speaking, the court does not find these texts to be assertions. They are inquiries, not declarative statements. Even if they were assertions, however, if the state intends to admit the statements to establish a timeline of events, they are not hearsay because they are not offered to establish truth. Therefore, they are not barred by IRE 801. So those text messages are coming in. Dylan's calls and texts to and from others. The state contends that so Ann Taylor didn't want any of this coming in. The state contends that the text between Dylan and her dad and the text between JM and the vandal alert are not hearsay because they will not be offered to show a timeline for the morning and early afternoon. In addition, the state notes that the phone call from Dylan to Emily is not a statement and therefore not hearsay. The court agrees and will be allowed the evidence for the purpose of a timeline, again, if the requisite foundation is laid. Verbal communications between Dylan and Bethany. The state contends that it intends to ask Dylan and Bethany at trial about statements they made to each other on November 13th, 2022. The state argues that the testimony will likely replicate that provided by these witnesses at the grand jury proceeding. The state contends they are admissible at the present sense impression or excited utterance exceptions. The defendant does not directly address the argument. To the extent that Dylan and Bethany seek to testify about the content of calls, texts, and conversations about what they perceived during the 4:30 a.m. timeframe, they could potentially be admissible under exceptions cited by the state. However, this is the judge ruling, the state must establish the foundational requirements for such proffered statements. The grand jury testimony does not appear to include any conversations between them after 4:19 a.m. to 4:37 a.m. time frame, and the state has not pointed any out. Thus, to the extent they testify to oral conversations they had after they woke up the next morning, the court will reserve ruling and consider any hearsay objections at that time. So we don't know if we're going to find out about that. We know already that the 911 call is coming in and that their initial statements are coming in. So let's take this down and let's talk about okay, so this is really interesting. Let me take this down, make sure we're all looking at the same thing. Okay, so let me move myself out of the way. Okay, this is really interesting. Okay, so legal experts highlight something that really stuck out at trial. So the sourcing on this is RawStory, and they are, I believe, using CNN also as one of their sources. So prosecutors in the case against Bryan Kohberger have asked the court for permission to conduct their own psychological testing after the trial judge rejected a defense motion to rule out capital punishment. So I think this is what, let me know what you guys think. Do you think, put a yes or a no, do you think yes, that the secret hearing on May 5th is regarding Bryan Kohberger's mental health and his diagnosis of autism? Or no, the May 5th hearing is not related to Bryan Kohberger's mental health and his autism diagnosis? Because it doesn't sound like the prosecution is buying the autism diagnosis. Now, we know Ann Taylor turned over, first she just tried to give the diagnoses, and the prosecution said, no, we want the tests that led to the diagnosis. We know she turned those over to the prosecution, but the prosecution is not having it. So it doesn't sound like whatever they got satisfied them. So we know that Bryan Kohberger got this autism diagnosis is recent. He got this while he was in jail. And, profiler Pat Brown said, you can find an expert to testify to almost anything. Now, I'm not saying that this psychologist, Rachel Orr, is doing that. I'm just, saying that that's, a profiler's perspective from a professional criminal profiler. Now, a CNN lawyer, Jean Caceres, and you might remember her also from Court TV, explained that the latest developments in this high-profile case. She said, quote, the prosecutors, and this is really interesting, do not state in the filing what it actually means, but they're telling the court and asking the court, we want to do psychologically testing on this capital punishment, I'm watching my words, defendant. This is according to an attorney who is appearing on CNN. She said, quote, we're not giving you the filing because you want to seal the filing because it cannot be exposed. Because they say he's already had testing done by the defense. All the results are there. Any diagnosis of mental conditions are there, but prosecutors want to go and do our own independent testing. Here is from the filing. It says specifically, the filing also reveals the nature of mental condition examinations already conducted. And some of the examinations and testing the state seeks to perform, some of which is personality testing, to which the defendant objects. So Ann Taylor the prosecution has already tried this one time to get her to agree to have not their expert, but just an independent person confirm, the OCD diagnosis and the diagnosis of autism. And Ann Taylor said no. So now they're asking the judge. So let's continue on. So this is the attorney speaking, and the sourcing that RawStory used was CNN. Now, there was a recent hearing in the Bryan Kohberger case. The defense is arguing to strike the capital punishment, and in that argument, I heard something that really struck me, and I want you to take a listen. And then she presented a video of defense attorney Alyssa Massoff arguing at the hearing that BK's lack of insight about his past good deeds, such as his volunteer work for Special Olympics or helping to save a person's life on the job, should be mitigating factors. So Elizabeth Massoff, this is the defense attorney. She works with Ann Taylor. She said about Bryan Kohberger here, he can see the logic in the word mitigation, but he has no ability to understand and help us develop a case for him for mercy. And it makes me wonder if they were trying to, get Bryan Kohberger to take a plea deal, and he just didn't. Let me know what you think. Casares also noted that Bryan Kohberger was a PhD candidate in the criminal justice, but his attorneys argued that he couldn't understand what his own attorneys were doing to present information that might lessen the severity of his sentence or his culpability for allegedly doing away with Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee. So it sounds like they tried to get him to take a plea deal. What do you guys think? Because I can't think of what else they would be talking about that he would not be able to understand what his own attorneys were doing to present information that might lessen the severity of a sentence or his culpability. So that sounds like a plea deal. Sounds like that his own defense team tried to get him to take a plea deal, and they didn't feel like he understood the ramifications of turning it down. Now, we saw something similar to this in the Ted Bundy case. You'll recall that Ted Bundy was also offered a plea deal, and in exchange for pleading guilty, he would not have had capital punishment imposed. He declined it and ultimately decided to represent himself as an attorney. He was a law student prior to being arrested, and he ended up, being done away with. He did end up with, I think, Florida. I don't know if it's Old Smoky or Old Sparky, something like that, but it was the electric chair. But listen to this, you guys. So I think there was a plea deal. Let me know if you have a different opinion of this information. So she said, this is a doctoral candidate in criminal justice. This is, again, the attorney for CNN. And the defense is now saying cannot comprehend when we are trying to do his mitigation phase, and these volunteer activities previously in his life would be mitigation. Well, first of all, the judge will not strike the capital punishment. So that's going forward. And I agree. I think Ann Taylor has filed 13 motions trying to get capital punishment taken off the table. I mean, she has really tried hard, and the judge just isn't having it. Because I think the feeling is that if this isn't a case for capital punishment, then nothing is. She said, we do not know if he will allow the prosecution to do this independent testing, but they have every right to do it because in the mitigation phase, they're going to put in, he's showing out the defense here, the autism spectrum disorder. So this attorney is saying that the prosecution does have a right to do their own testing. She said, as an attorney, I said to myself, are they going to raise a competency issue? Now, what's funny is if he had stayed and not crossed the border, allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty, into Idaho to commit these crimes. If he had stayed in Washington, they don't have capital punishment. And Washington State has a more lenient competency laws than what Idaho has. But she said, but that's neither here nor there. But she said, as an attorney, I said to myself, are they going to raise a competency issue? She added, competency is that you're not able to aid and assist your attorney for trial. We've seen nothing of that. But that is basically what she's about Ann Taylor and Elizabeth Massoff here, basically saying that argument. But once again, it was to get rid of or strike the capital punishment. And she says it here, but I just don't want to play it because I don't know how CNN is about copyright. So I thought that was very, very interesting. Let me grab the next thing. We have a lot to go through. Okay, so let's talk about, would things have been different? Would things have been different if they had gone for food that night? Because we know now that a lot has been attributed that Dylan who Dylan was texting at, 2:10 a.m. She was texting the Uber driver, and people, were like, ooh, lots of conspiracy theories about that. Now we know that it was because the four girls were planning to try to go eat. And it sounds like Dylan and Bethany probably wanted to go get something to eat. Kaylee and Maddie, probably because they had already gotten food at the grub truck, probably didn't want to. But she had texted to see if the Uber driver was available, because she was friends with him. And I guess he was, or maybe he wasn't. I don't know what that came back with. And we're going to talk about BK's connections to the victims, new information from Steve Gonzalez, Bryan Kohberger's search for the crimes before the 911 call, Bryan Kohberger's suspicious sister. Did she turn him into law enforcement? Is she testifying on behalf of the prosecution? And Bryan Kohberger's history of behavior problems in just a moment. So please stay with me. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's persistent pattern of intrusive behaviors. So we know it's a really common trait with stalkers. Now, the statute in Idaho does not support the legal definition of stalking. The legal definition in Idaho, for it to qualify legally as stalking, means the victims have to feel threatened. They have to feel threatened. And in this case, I don't think these victims really knew he existed, but there were patterns. He did have connections to the victim. So let's talk about that a little bit. And we know that there was a persistent pattern of intrusive behavior directed toward specific individuals. And we know it was directed at Maddie and possibly also Kaylee. And we know this because BK was following both young women on Instagram. I showed you the shadow dragon data. Christy and Steve Gonzalez have also told us that Bryan Kohberger was liking all of Maddie's photos. He also liked some of Kaylee's. And we've heard that he had pictures of one of the victims on his phone. Now, what we don't know is if he, when were these pictures downloaded? If they were prior to the crime, that is a problem for the defense, in my opinion. Now, for the naysayers that say there's no connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims, there are connections. And this is just what we know about so far. We know he was following Kaylee and Maddie on Instagram. And we know he was also messaging one of the girls over and over repeatedly. Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? So I think his initial infatuation, turned into hate. And we also know that his DNA was left on the inside snap of the knife sheath found underneath and to the side of Maddie. That is a connection to the victims. That's two. Number three, he was spotted at the University of Idaho campus by more than one student, where Kaylee and Maddie went, and Xana and Ethan all went to school. BK did not attend the University of Idaho. He went to Washington State University. So why was he hanging out in the student union at University of Idaho in the cafeteria sipping water? So I believe we're going to see one young woman after another come up and talk about seeing Bryan Kohberger and his creepy behavior, and also University of Idaho, the fact that he was on that campus. 4, his cell phone was pinging in and around the 1122 King Road home, not 11 times, but now we know 23 times, and that some of these phone pings line up with video of Bryan Kohberger. We also know that there's ATM withdrawals from Bryan Kohberger that are also lining up. And we know that this traffic stop, Ann Taylor tried to keep this August 21st traffic stop. Now, this is not the traffic stop that we saw, you guys. This is not the one where he's talking to the WSU, on WSU campus, talking to the female law enforcement officer about pulling into the crosswalk. This is also not the 2 traffic stops that he had with his dad when he was on his way from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. This is a traffic stop we have not seen the body cam footage on. And Ann Taylor, there's something on it she doesn't like because she did not want to let it in. We don't know what it is yet. But we know his behavior characterized by desire to maintain contact, exert power and control over the victims. And we saw this in the way that Bryan Kohberger tended and befriended his WSU colleague. So I think this shows a pattern of behavior. Let me just make sure I'm not blocking your view. Okay, you guys can see it. So he broke into A female colleague at WSU, Washington State University, he went into her house and he moved some things around. Now, Steve Gonzalez thinks that it's possible that Bryan Kohberger also entered the 1122 King Road house. And we're going to talk about a bunch of new information since our last live stream from Steve Gonzalez. But according to Dateline and NewsNation sources, Bryan Kohberger tended and befriended a woman at Washington State University. And there's multiple sources on this. You guys can do your own research. I'm using NewsNation because it doesn't require me to have a subscription to it. But there's other sources too. I could have pulled up like 8 articles about this. Bryan Kohberger broke into her property. This is months before the November 13th crimes. He moved things around, but he didn't steal anything. The woman has not been identified. She said that Bryan Kohberger offered to come over and help her out and said, I'll install security cameras for you. This is like some next level. This is some next level masterminding. He then accessed her footage remotely because he got her Wi-Fi password when he was installing the security cameras. So he installed security cameras into her house and used them to spy on her. Use them to spy on her. So I do think that this is going to show, and I have another source. This is Fox 13. Let me just show you. There's multiple sources. You guys can do your own research. You don't have to take my word on anything. Feel free at any time to do your own research on it. So this is Fox 13. Same story. Okay. And then I just want to show you my sourcing on the following the victims on Instagram. Newsweek also carried the story in addition to the other sources I gave you. I also have a Newsweek source on this too. So you don't have to take my word for it, because I know some people, I think there's some people that even if there was a video of him actually committing the crime would still tell me that he didn't do it. And that's fine. We don't all have to agree on every case, and we're not going to. All right, so let me check in with chat. It's been a minute. And oh wow. Okay, I am behind on chat. All right. Okay, so still have a lot of ones. A lot of ones still coming in. This is from the other polling that we did. Oh yeah, stalling. So this is, if you're putting a 1 in the chat if you think Ann Taylor was stalling. So all ones. I haven't seen any 2s. DW says, I don't know. The roommate saw what happened. Appears to be a vacuum. Well, that could have been a vacuum, but if you think about like a vacuum cleaner appliance, it could also have been the knife too. Could also have been a bag, because we know Bethany saw somebody standing at the patio doors putting stuff into a bag. A lot of ones. Diana says, BK searched online the crimes before the 911 call. Yeah, he did. We're going to talk about that in just a second, Diana. You're right. 1. And AZ thinks she's making excuses. Rebecca said, I find it comical that Ann Taylor was asking the judge to prevent the state from using the psychopath or some evidence, and and BT said they didn't plan. They had other stronger evidence to use. Yeah, and the other thing that I want to clear up is I've seen in the comment section a couple of times is people telling me that the prosecution has decided they're not going to use the DNA. Okay, that's like partially true, but not really accurate. So I just want to clarify this because I think there's some confusion there. The prosecution is not going to use the IgG DNA that matched to Bryan Kohberger's dad, Michael Kohberger. They're not using that because Michael Kohberger is not on trial. But they are using the DNA. They have not agreed to not use the DNA. They're using the DNA that was collected from the cheek swab, also called a buccal swab, from Bryan Kohberger that they obtained with a court order. So Bryan Kohberger didn't volunteer this. They got a court order. They got the cheek swab, and that is the DNA that matched the DNA on the knife sheath in the octillion range, not million, which is 1, not billion, which is 2, but octillion, which is 8. So almost more than there are people on the planet. The prosecution is absolutely using that DNA. So I just wanted to clarify that. one. I'm still getting a lot of ones. All right. So Marco says that Ann Taylor isn't just stalling, she was throwing the spaghetti at the wall. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, she's doing a good job, but do you guys think that she was trying to get a plea deal? And that's what that whole thing was with the CNN article I just shared. What that was all about, that he was not cooperating. My missing piece says she feels bad for his dad. I do too. I mean, I feel more bad for the victims' families, because at least with him, they can still talk to him. The victims' families, missing piece thinks the dad knew. I don't know if he did or not. I mean, denial is a powerful thing, and he might have just been in denial. His parents really do seem like decent people, you guys. I mean, people say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but in this case, I do think, his mom was a special ed teacher. His dad was a janitor at the same school that his mom worked at. I don't know, maybe things were different behind closed doors, but from what we know so far, it seems like they were decent people, and they just gotta, you know, yeah, you're, yeah, right, Karina. Sharman says his mom was allegedly a fangirl for Ted Bundy. No, no, no. She just doesn't believe in capital punishment, which is I don't think she was a fangirl for Ted Bundy. I don't think that. But and I'm not saying you're wrong. I haven't read it, but this is my understanding. And if I misunderstood it, then please let me know. And I'm not. Please don't think I'm singling you out at all. I'm just like thinking out loud. I don't want to like impugn the parents, because it's really not their fault either. But my understanding is she did write an op-ed about capital punishment when Ted Bundy, because I guess they're older. They're older. They're in their 60s, both of them. So she remembers the Ted Bundy trial. So she wrote an op-ed about Ted Bundy and thinking that it, wasn't right. So she just wrote an op-ed about that. So she's just not pro capital punishment. And how ironic is it that her son is up for this? I mean, oh my gosh. Didi said it was right around the corner from Kings Road. And yeah, that's where that traffic stop was. And that's why Ann Taylor did not want that traffic stop to come in, but it's coming in. That's the August 21st one. We haven't seen that one yet. Milos said, I think the prosecution will have several women testify to BK's. Oh yeah, I think so too. I think they're going to have the Idaho young women. I think they may have this WSU woman. And just think that, if steps had been taken along the way as, problems were coming up, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's why the November 13th date was chosen. Maybe I'm wrong. So this is a speculation alert. But in my opinion, that November 13th was significant because in Elliot Rogers' manifesto, and remember that page that they talked about being underlined, page 118, and that's the very last line of page 118. Elliot Rogers talks about a day of retribution. Now, this is not the day that he committed the crimes. This was what he considered the day of retribution, that it would be a party weekend, that it would be, against sorority girls. Well, this was a big party weekend at Idaho. They had a big football game. In fact, there was a party at the 1122 King Road home the night before, right? And then he couldn't jump in a time machine and go back to 2013 because Elliot Rogers put a date in November of 2013. So I believe that the November 13th was Bryan Kohberger's, in my opinion. We won't know till we get to the trial, so the speculation, but that was his hat tip to Elliot Rogers. Let me know if you have a different feeling. We don't all have to agree. We're not going to all agree on every single case, and that's okay. All opinions are welcome. If you're a critical thinker that likes to have all of the information to make up your own mind, then you are in the right place. Donna, thank you so much for your $1.99 super sticker. I really, really appreciate you and your kindness. Want to thank Christine for being a channel member for 2 months. Thank you so much. And I think next month your check mark will turn to blue. Thank you, Christine, for the $1.99 super sticker. Thank you, Njaz, for another gifted membership. This is the second one. Wow. Thank you so much, Njaz. And I just want to thank Marco Benevides. Sorry, let me just try that one more time. Benevides for gifting a reporter room membership. And Marco, if I have mispronounced your name, let me know. We are going to do a channel members live after the Chris Watts today. So we'll find you guys. You can tell me how to pronounce your name during that live. AJ says it has become increasingly apparent his defense knows he's guilty. Well, see, that's what and hence now his inability to assist. Yeah, and I'm just wondering if they offered him a plea deal and tried to impress upon him that he needed to take it, and he just isn't listening. But I don't think that that's really going to constitute a legal that he's not able to assist because he wasn't a PhD program. Let me know if you have a different take on it. But yeah, True Crime says, Snoopy says he definitely is not a well person, probably digging jail and all the attention he's getting from fans. Yeah, you could always back up the chat. Liz says, but his mom is and always has been in denial. And that may be the case. I do think there were signs. And I told you guys, I thought that it was really strange that Bryan Kohberger, remember last week I shared with you about the other inmate. This was at the Pennsylvania jail. And I shared with you that he had been like harassing the guards and this other woman in the jail. So they were in a holding cell. She wasn't in the same cell with him. She was catty corner from him. But they had to keep telling him to put his pants back on, pull his shirt down. And I said, I'm wondering if this is similar to what happened in high school, because what happened in high school was whatever it was so drastic, whatever his behaviors was, it wasn't something that they addressed with a detention. It wasn't something they addressed even with a suspension for a day or 2 days or 3 weeks or 3 days. They removed him completely from his high school program, and he had to finish high school online. So all we know is that it's related to female students. So something drastic happened. And the reason that a lot of people believe that Bryan Kohberger got through DeSales University without getting into any trouble is because it was during the pandemic. Right? It was during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, he would have been going to school online. So not interacting, because we know he had altercations with his professor at WSU, right? Multiple altercations that we've heard about. And it ended up in him getting fired from his teaching position. So because he was online at DeSales, he didn't get into any altercations with his professors. He didn't get into any altercations with female students. All of these problems came about when he was put back in the classroom at WSU. So was his mom in denial? If he had gotten a better intervention, when he got kicked out of the high school program, would things have turned out differently for him and for Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana, allegedly? Yeah, Richard. Missing Piece feels bad for his dad. Milo says, I bet there's a long history of him stalking and creeping every young woman in his sphere. Sharman says, BK has had 4 pullovers by cops and no tickets, just warnings. Yeah, that's true. Chihuahua says, I don't know if we had a ticket on the August 21st or not. Maybe he did. I don't know. So I'm just agreeing with you. I don't know for a fact that so I'll have to check on that. Chihuahua says, how do you think the dad knew? I don't know that he knew or didn't know. I don't know. I don't know what they knew and when they knew it. But definitely interesting. All right, let's continue on because we have still quite a bit to get through. But I did want to show you, and I want to talk about some new information from Steve Gonzalez, and then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's sisters. All right, so Steve Gonzalez and also Bryan Kohberger's history of behavior problems. Let me grab this one. I'm just going to close a couple of these out. I don't need them. I think having that picture up there is okay. Let's see if I need this one open. Nope, we did that one. Okay, good. So I can close out a couple of these. All right, so let's leave Bryan's picture up so if anybody comes by, they know who and what I'm talking about. All right, so Steve Gonzalez speculated that that it was Bryan Kohberger making some of the noise complaint calls to the 1122 King Road home in order to see how long it would take law enforcement to respond to the house. He said there were a lot of noise complaints, and we know that Dylan and Bethany, that Steve Gonzalez also said that he thought that there might have been an agreement in place with Dylan and Bethany, who were the two youngest in the home, with Kaylee and Maddie, who were the only two roommates that were over the age of 21. Now, they could have gotten in trouble. They could have gotten kicked out of their house for underage drinking. They could have, remember, Dylan and Bethany had both been underage drinking. They were over 18, but they were not 21. They could have, Kaylee and Maddie could have maybe gotten suspended from school, maybe not been allowed to take their exams or something like that. So Steve thinks this is why they were reaching out, Bethany and Dylan, because he thinks there was an agreement in place between Maddie, Kaylee, Bethany, Dylan, that the younger roommates would check in with them before they called the police because of the concern about drinking. So we won't find out everything until the roommates take the stand. But I believe, let me know if you have a different feeling, that Dylan's still alive because she didn't come out of that bedroom. We know that Xana and Ethan, Xana had to have come out of the bedroom. One of them came out of the bedroom. Somehow that DoorDash bag got back on the kitchen sink. We also heard from Steve Gonzalez that Bryan Kohberger Googled the crime before law enforcement went to the house. So before that 911 call that we have all heard that was placed by Dylan, Bethany, Hunter, and Emily, Bryan Kohberger Googled the crime at the 1122 King Road home. So I think this is going to be a huge problem for Ann Taylor. Just an absolute, another big hurdle to overcome. Each thing by itself, you can maybe explain away. Yeah, the shower curtain was gone. He's got OCD. Yeah, he was wearing gloves, not before the crime, because we have the traffic stops. We've seen 3 of the 4 on video. He wasn't wearing gloves in any of those. But suddenly after he knows he left his knife sheath behind, all of a sudden he's wearing, medical grade gloves around, separating his trash from his parents' trash and walking his trash down to his neighbor's trash bin. Not his parents' trash, not everybody's trash, just his trash. And law enforcement's watching this. They're watching this because they have him under surveillance. So I had a couple people come into the comment section and say that Bryan Kohberger would have heard about this from his friends. There's no evidence that Bryan Kohberger knew anyone at the University of Idaho. In fact, I don't really feel like this guy had a lot of friends. And I told you guys, I think the prosecution is going to work hard to prove that he acted alone in this case. That's why they're gathering all this video surveillance. He was new to the area, one. Second of all, Bryan Kohberger attended WSU in Washington, not Idaho, University of Idaho. He attended a completely different school. There's no evidence other than having Emily and Hunter come over that they invited a bunch of friends to come over. I'm not saying people couldn't have gathered around once law enforcement arrived, but there's no evidence that they called all their friends over and there was a cleanup crew. I've heard that speculated, but there's been no evidence proving that. I cannot get a confirmation on that. So unless Ann Taylor has something that we don't know about, there's nothing that shows that there was any type of cleanup crew. Fifth, the very same people, and this is really sad, who are claiming that Bryan Kohberger would have somehow heard about this crime from friends, which again, I just don't think he had friends, and definitely, maybe 1 or 2 friends, the casual friends that he went running with or from high school, but nobody at University of Idaho that, but the very same people are saying that somehow Bryan Kohberger would have heard about it from friends. Also claim that Bryan Kohberger had no connections to the victims. So I don't know, you guys. We'll find out at the trial. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I'm just going to bring you all the information, but I just don't see how you can say he doesn't have connections to the victims, but then he would have known about the crimes, even though he didn't have connections to the victims. So I don't know. I was like trying to make that make sense. So he appeared, Steve Gonzalez did, on the Ashleigh Banfield show, and he shared that the perpetrator went for Maddie first. So we're getting more information about the order. And then Kaylee was second. He said Kaylee woke up. He doesn't know how much Kaylee fought back, but he thinks she fought back some. And again, I think this, if you think about a 7-inch blade, it would be able to go, right through you. And you would be able to silence someone. And even as things are, watch my words here, even as people are bleeding out, and he said a lot of it went back into their own lungs, so they were drowning, they still could have fought back even if they couldn't say anything. And I just don't think these crimes sounded like what we think they sounded like, because Ethan and Xana didn't call 911 either. But he's not sure of exactly how much fighting that Kaylee did. But he said, quote, "This monster struck her multiple times." This was on the Ashleigh Banfield show. He said that the coroner, Babbitt, and I showed you the receipts from that during the last week's live stream, shared other details, but he wasn't going to be able to share what they were because he's not going to compromise the case. But it was really heartbreaking to hear Steve talk about the court processes and how the perpetrator, and it's all about their rights, and that, victims don't seem to have any rights in our court system in America. And the families and loved ones of the victims don't seem to have any rights either. And Ashleigh said that she had a conversation with the coroner. This is Coroner Babbitt early on, and that the coroner shared with her that Xana also had defensive wounds on her hands and fingers, and that appeared that Xana also fought aggressively with the perpetrator. Now, Steve revealed that Kaylee was struck in the face and that her nose was broken. So trigger warning here. I just want to say this is graphic. Trigger warning. I will put a 1 up when I am done, if you want to just silence for a second. Steve revealed that Kaylee was struck in the face and that her nose was broken. And this just is like the stuff of nightmares. It just breaks your heart. He shared that it was multiple hits. He said that the blows that the perpetrator gave to Kaylee's head and face would have done away with her without even using the K-bar. And I love Steve Gonzalez for this, because he said, my daughter would expect me to stand up for her, and that's what I'm going to do. And I love him for this. This has got to be so hard for him to, come on and talk about what this guy did to his daughter. This is his child, his baby girl. Steve said he would go to jail if that's what they wanted to do, but he was not going to protect the guy that, quote, illed, with a K, his kid. He said, I'm never going to protect him. He also raised concerns that he was worried that because, he said there was early on with John Judge, that he didn't feel like there was leadership in the case. He just felt like, they were having hearings to set more hearings. And he just was, at first he was really worried. He didn't want the case to be moved to Latah County, but now that he's in Ada County and he's got this new judge in Ada County, he is happy with this new judge. He said it's a good thing. So I'm wondering if Ann Taylor is also thinking, if Steve and the victims' families are thinking this is a good thing, we have a judge that's moving forward, we have a judge that's following the law. If Ann Taylor's realizing I made a massive mistake moving out of Latah County, I might get a more sympathetic liberal jury, but I'm not getting as laid back and as much of a pro-defense judge as I had in Judge John Judge. Now, they talked about the selfie, and Ashleigh Banfield asked Steve about some of the things that happened. And he started talking about the females who had a tally of Bryan Kohberger doing things about making them nervous. And he said that Bryan Kohberger was following them outside of the classroom. He said that Bryan Kohberger was standing in front of the door. So basically blocking their way and forcing them to have to maneuver around him. So kind of a power move. And then he said that Bryan Kohberger was following them to their car. And basically that Bryan Kohberger was forcing interactions with female students. And when they went to WSU, and this is like where I just feel like if, they had listened a little bit more and taken some action, maybe it wouldn't have come to this. Maybe he would have been removed sooner. But the students communicated, and they were told that they had to document things. So they started documenting things, and they had to document the place and times that he was doing these things and whatever witnesses witnessed it. So Steve said they started putting together a tally. These are his words. And Ashleigh asked him about that. And they said that the students were calling this a Bryan tally, and that they did do this, and that 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 also he learned from this Bryan tally that Bryan Kohberger had missed school on Monday, November 13th, that day that he took that creepy looking selfie in the mirror. And Steve believes that he spent his time gloating and that he would have been reliving the crime. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I think there would have been some type of essay gratification. There would have been fantasizing before and definitely after. So let's talk about, he searched for this before the 911 was called. So Google searches that Bryan Kohberger did before the 911 call. Steve believes that this might do him in. And I agree. I think this, if he searched out the crime before this was reported to law enforcement, this is potentially as big, if not bigger, than the DNA evidence. That's just another huge piece. And if he had victims, pictures of one of the victims on his phone, and so he said that Bryan Kohberger, he thought that Bryan Kohberger thought he was smarter than everyone. I'm paraphrasing here, that Bryan Kohberger used a gift card to order on Amazon, but he made a big mistake. He ordered a K-bar knife. This is a knife that's not used for camping or hunting. This is used for humans. It's a military knife. And he had everything delivered to himself in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, at his parents' house. He even checked on shipping to see when the knife was going to arrive. So Steve believes that Bryan Kohberger chose his victims around the time that he ordered the K-bar knife. So he believes that the victims were chosen in March of 2022 when Bryan Kohberger was still back in Pennsylvania. So this is huge. I have never heard anybody say this before. I don't know. This is, so I'm just going to put, Steve, this is Steve sharing what he thinks happened. So a little speculation warning. He also shared that he believed that Bryan Kohberger had the ability to listen to 911 calls and that he was listening to 911 calls. And he said that this information, this is the calls that he would have made on the 1122 King Road home. He believes that this information would have given him important data as to where the parties were going, where the popular girls were. Remember I told you about that criminology lab at WSU that had access to 5 different police departments? And WSU was like, oh, no, he didn't have access to that lab, even though it was on the same floor. Yeah. And the state points out that the 23 different times that Bryan Kohberger drove to that dead end road where that house sat, that house sat on a dead end road. He wouldn't just be driving by there. Well, guys, I think I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm going to have to tell you about his sister. I'll put out another video tomorrow because I have a Chris Watts video that I have committed to doing. I do want to just say a big thank you to everybody who joined me today. And thank you to our producers, Jazz, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Pepper, and Christy Valentine. Thank you to our channel members so much for your support of Reporter Room. If you would like to become a channel member and have your name appear like this in all of my live streams and in my videos, just hit the join button. It's next to the subscribe button. But even if you don't want to do that, please subscribe. I have 1,300 people watching right now. It would be so great if you guys would hit the subscribe button. It's free, and I cannot get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. So please help a girl out. I do put a lot of work and time into getting these live streams ready for you guys. And it would be so great if you would be willing to subscribe. And thank you so much. Super thanks and coffee gratitude for last week. Thank you so much, you guys. And super thanks also. Thank you so much. And Jazz, thank you so much. Thank you to our mods, our head mod, Brother Mike, and head mod and Jazz. And oh my gosh, you guys, I'm like so thankful. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I missed this, Esmeralda. I apologize. She said, BK is the creepiest. You're the best, Jessica. Oh, thank you, Esmeralda. Thank you so much. That's really, really nice of you. Kami gifted a Reporter Room membership. Wow. And you guys, if you got that, we're doing a Reporter Room members only live after the Chris Watts video, which we're going to go do that right now. And thank you to MR for the $4.99 super sticker. It says, I appreciate your kindness. I appreciate your kindness. Thank you so much, you guys. So if you haven't subscribed, please do, and follow me over. I'm going to be talking about the Chris Watts case right now. So please subscribe. Thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me, and I will see you